Good morning, Sean. It's a real pleasure to have this conversation with you this morning about our joint project, which is to run through until World Travel Market's virtual event in November. That's the week after the face-to-face trade show. What we want to do is to look at the second existential crisis confronting us as a species, and that is the biodiversity and the loss of biodiversity around the world. And we want to explore what tourism can do to benefit biodiversity and help to sustain it. Historically, tourism has been quite a major funder of biodiversity maintenance through tourism revenues. That's obviously been threatened by COVID, but there's a longer term problem. Sean, you're speaking here this morning on behalf of the World Tourism Forum from Lucerne. Do you want to just say something about the vision from the World Tourism Forum about biodiversity and what tourism can do to support it?
Good morning, Harold. Always good to speak to you. From the side of the World Tourism Forum Lucerne, we've been connecting global leaders in travel, tourism, and hospitality to the next generation for some 15 years. We've got 4 pillars: innovation, talent, diversity, and sustainable development. So when we now look at resetting travel and tourism in a post-COVID world, we do that in a context of 3 overriding challenges. It's about net zero emissions, about carbon neutrality in 2050. That's a mere 3 decades from now. It's about zero species loss after 2030. That's a mere decade from now. And it's about achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, so global goals by 2030, decisively addressing poverty, inequality in society. So that's a broader context. Within this context, we recognize that travel and tourism contributes 10.3% of global GDP. That was before this crisis hit, and 1 in every 10 jobs globally. So as a global sector, there's no reason that we cannot be at the forefront of a great reset, of rebalancing our world and creating a new world order. And that includes a symbiotic relationship between tourism, biodiversity, ecosystem services, and communities. Now, we know that species are disappearing at a faster pace than at any point in human history. And as it stands here today, we know that 1 million plant and animal species face extinction, are threatened by extinction. So we've got a very big responsibility as we grow this sector to look at our balance sheet. And on our balance sheet, there's positives, and you mentioned some of those positives, but there's also some negatives. And we've got to make sure that in this great reset, we swing the pendulum to not only mitigate impacts and to not only have zero impacts, but to have a positive impact on the economy, on society, and on the environment. And that's what this Leadership Conversation series will be about. We'll be speaking to CEOs and industry leaders, government leaders, the world's foremost scientists and academics, but also communities and startups, about best practice stories out there, about new business models, new partnership models, new funding models. We'll be asking, what is the value of nature in decision making? And what's the respective roles of governments, industry, communities, and every traveler, every tourist out there. So for us, it's about bringing together some tough messages, but also inspiring stories from change makers, and ultimately to inspire the next generation of change makers to walk this path with us.
Sean, you can probably see that behind me is the logo for the World Responsible Tourism Awards, and they are very different this year because of COVID. But ever since Justin and I set up the awards in 2004, we've had some fantastic biodiversity type projects there. We know good things are happening. The problem is to make more of those good things happen, and for more of the industry to do what the best operators are already doing. I think we're both keen to hear from people who've got something to say, and you can see below this video that there's the address for the Responsible Tourism Partnership Forum, where you'll be able to send us messages and engage in debate, as well as watch the video discussions and the major session at WTM London in November this year.
Thank you, Harold. We look forward to working together on this. We both have broad stakeholder communities across the travel and tourism value chain. And once we've done this in a build up to WTM in London, we want to replicate this in the rest of the world. In Latin America, it's Sao Paulo, in Cape Town for World Travel Market Africa, and ultimately Arabian Travel Market in Dubai.
And in India as well, I hope, because there's a lot of threatened species there. Thanks very much for your time, Sean.
Thanks, Harold.